Hello everyone. So we are going to start our UPSC Sociology Mains test series discussion, and in that we are first going to take today two questions. Okay na? So first question would be, explain the social and intellectual condition which contributed to the emergence of sociology. So as we know that sociology first emerged where? In Western Europe, and it was a response. It was the response to the social condition, or say intellectual condition, which was prevailing in Europe at that point of time. Okay. So now first thing we have to do is to identify. Okay, now what identify? We have to identify the meaning of the question. So the question is simply asking that what were the social conditions? What were the social conditions? What were the intellectual conditions? Okay, na? Social condition, intellectual condition. Okay, na? Which were prevalent at the time when sociology emerged. And what was their role? How they contributed to the emergence of sociology. So we have to explain this. So you will start in intro. You can write what is sociology. In one line you must define it. So sociology is nothing but an attempt towards scientific study of society. So that is the standard definition of sociology, and it emerged only in 19th century in Western Europe. Its origin actually was shaped by social and intellectual condition, okay na, that prevailed in Europe at that time. Okay, that social conditions created the need for a new knowledge, okay, to understand society, and the intellectual condition actually also provided that means to do so. Okay, na? So now here question actually arises that what were the social conditions. Okay, so you are expected in this question to mention those social conditions. So you can say that one, Western Europe, okay na, underwent profound change with the collapse of that feudal society and the rise of capitalist industrial society. Okay na? And these changes actually produced a paradoxical situation there. What paradoxical situation? It is said that paradox lies in the fact that there was simultaneously a state of hope and a state of, you can say, gloom, despair in people's mind. So the two things were present, hope and despair. That was very much there. Now on one hand, there was growth of science and technology, which what it did, it actually enhanced people's control over nature, okay, enhanced mastery of nature, and capitalism has created unprecedented wealth for some people, at least you can say, and this actually created hope. But there is other side of the story. There was a problematic side, okay na? You can say traumatic side, to which actually it caused despair. So what was that? There was emergence of new social classes of bourgeoisie, capitalist and proletariat, and these classes led to polarization of society, and there were also accentuation of inequality in society. And see, when inequality is high, so poverty is also rampant. The workers, proletariat, who constituted majority, they lived in abject poverty. and this led to class wars in European society, because no society can live, you can say, peacefully if there is gross inequality in the society. So this thing was happening that time in Europe. Clear? Then also there was rapid urbanization, and as a consequence of this rapid urbanization was that it actually broke down the kinship networks, kinship ties, community bond, you can say. So along with poverty, there were growing isolation of the poor, and all this led to crime, increased crime in society. There was prevalence of disease, okay na? There was huge pollution, and it was said that people were living in unhygienic condition in the urban areas. Clear? Then there was also commercial and industrial revolution. There was very important development, that there was actually change in economic power. Economic power shifted to bourgeoisie class. Now as this point, locus of economic power shifted from, say, landed feudal class to the bourgeoisie, so what happened, that traditional feudal monarchical system, monarchical political order, that was also challenged, and this challenge was manifested in the form of French Revolution. And you might have studied that French Revolution took place in 1789, okay na? And this was followed by violent revolutions throughout Europe, not only in France, French Revolution, no, throughout Europe in 19th century. And as a result, it created a state of near anarchy in Europe. And in fact, this 19th century has been called the century of revolution by the historians. And it is said that sociology is a child of age of revolution. So you must note down these statements also. Okay na? So there was what? Very volatile political condition. Huge anarchy in European society. Now these were what? These were various problems. So these problems actually created a craving for peace and harmony in the society, to make the society livable again, to make a better society. So people craved for this, that there must be a better society. We cannot live continuously in this state of anarchy, bloodshed, okay na, conflict, okay na. So they wanted to have a perfect society, you can say a better society. But the traditional wisdom and religion has nothing to offer to solve this new problem which that time Europe was experiencing. And that is why there was a need for new knowledge to understand and rebuild the existing that European society. Clear now? Now fortunately you can say this was also accompanied with intellectual developments in Western Europe, that a new intellectual conditions emerged that actually helped in building that new knowledge, which later on came to be known as sociology. Clear? Now with intellectual condition, what happened, that now traditional belief and religion, it started actually losing its acceptability in the society. So religion started losing its plausibility. Okay, and here you can mention T.B. Baltimore's perspective also. He has actually mentioned 4 intellectual conditions, 4 intellectual antecedents which have influenced the emergence of sociology. Okay, na? So T.B. Baltimore, T.B. Baltimore's perspective. So 4 intellectual antecedents which led to emergence of sociology in Western Europe according to T.B. Baltimore. So he says one was political philosophy. Political philosophy. Secondly, he is saying philosophy of history. Philosophy of history. Third, biological theory of evolution. Biological theory of evolution. And fourth was social survey. Fourth, you can write down social survey. Okay, na? So these were the 4 intellectual antecedents which led to emergence of sociology in Western Europe according to T.B. Baltimore. So you must write down that. Okay. Now, under that political philosophy, you can say there were various political philosophers like Montesquieu, who was talking about separation of power and liberty of individual. There was also Rousseau. He has talked about social contract, where people of the country, okay na, that European, he said people had the right to choose their government, to choose their sovereign. John Locke he was also there. He talked about right to life, right to property. Okay na, that personal freedom must be there in society. There was also Voltaire, political philosopher. He stood for rights of individuals. He stood for freedom of speech. Okay na? So various such kind of that philosophers that were present in European society. Okay, and what these philosophers, political philosophers did, they actually ignited the minds of the common people. So common people started rejecting various superstitions prevalent in the society, and they also at the same time started questioning to the state's legitimacy, because kingship system was there, democracy was not there, and king was largely highly tyrant. Okay na? So political philosophy. Then what is philosophy of history? It means inquiry into the nature of change, that how change actually happens in the society. So inquiry into the nature of change. And Enlightenment thinkers, they saw nature of change as progress. That what? That humankind is progressing. Okay na? So philosophy of history. Now, by 17th century, science and scientific method that actually gained respectability for unraveling the mysteries of nature and for solving practical problems through mastery over what? Nature. And by this 18th century, in a new current of social thought, you can say by this 18th century, a new current of social thought that also emerged. And what was that? That was Enlightenment. And the Enlightenment philosophers, so these political philosophers were some were also this Enlightenment philosophers like Montesquieu, and there were others like Turgot, and of course I mentioned this Voltaire, Rousseau, okay, now there was Condorcet, even Adam Smith, that famous famous economist Adam Smith, he was also Enlightenment thinker, okay, now then there was Herder, Ferguson, Hegel. So these people, Enlightenment thinkers, okay, now what they believed, that society was undergoing progress, orderly progress, and it has actually two implications. One implication was that it means that a better society can indeed be created because mankind is advancing, okay, now progressing. And secondly, that because the process of change is orderly, a scientific study of this change is possible. A scientific study of whatever changes that was happening that time in European society, that is very much possible. So what? So by combining reason and research, they said that we can create a new knowledge. And the contemporary problem, those problems which were prevalent in European society that time, they said these problems are nothing but temporary problems which could be eliminated, which could be solved. How? With the help of new knowledge. You know? So that is how Enlightenment contributed to the emergence of sociology. Clear now? But at the same time, there was an opposite current of thought which was also very much prevalent in Europe that time, which was actually called counter-enlightenment. Counter-enlightenment, or you can say anti-modern thought or conservative thought, which wanted to preserve the status quo. So there were scholars like Louis de Bonald, Joseph de Maistre, Edmund Burke, okay now. So they belong to anti-enlightenment school. Now their counter-enlightenment or anti-enlightenment thought emphasized on the need for peace and harmony, and therefore the goal of the new knowledge, new discipline, were determined by this very counter-enlightenment, okay, and the means to be followed by the new knowledge, that is scientific method, was emphasized by Enlightenment movement. And that is how the idea of making a scientific study of society that emerged in Western European society. Okay now? So on this line you can frame your answer. Clear? Now we will look into second question.